Okay, welcome to the ACFID DFAT webinar, everybody. I'm Ross Slater, the new Learning and Innovation Lead at ACFID in Canberra. So before I introduce our speakers from DFAT today, I'd just like to remind you all that the webinar will be made available on our YouTube channel next week, most likely. This webinar attracted a lot of demand, and there's a number of people from member organisations which missed out. So yeah, pass on, I guess, that it will be available on YouTube next week. After the webinar as well, I'll also be sending out an email with a link to the survey for feedback. We'd be grateful for your input, especially this time as we're looking at how we can continue to improve the way we deliver the webinars and the other offerings. So I'd appreciate your help in filling out the survey once you receive the email. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Annabelle Cousins of the ANCP program at DFAT and Deborah Peterson of the comms team in DFAT, who will be taking you through communications. So welcome.
Thank you. And hello everyone, and welcome to this ANCP Communications webinar. Yes, my name is Annabelle Cousins and I'm the Communications Manager for the NGO Program Performance and Quality section, and that's the section that manages the ANCP. Then also with me is Deborah Peterson, and she's the Executive Officer in the Parliamentary and Media Branch. And Deborah's division is the one responsible for DFAT branding guidelines. So it's great to have her here to provide her understanding of DFAT's requirements. I'll start with a quick introduction, then I'm going to hand over to Deborah to give a summary of DFAT's guidelines for branding aid projects. I'll also summarise the acknowledgement clauses that are within our ANCP manual. We'll then move on to online communications, and Deborah will cover at DFAT communications more broadly, and I will talk about our new ANCP-specific online and social media guidelines. Finally, I'm going to cover some of the work we've got in progress within ANCP, including products to support NGO engagement with posts and some standard wording that I've started to develop for elements of the ANCP program. After that, we'll have time for questions and feedback. Being the first webinar that DFAT's run on communications, I'm really keen to hear if we're providing the right information or what else you'd like to hear about. I suppose a point of just possibly asking people to save questions as much as possible and until the end, and we'll try and address them as a group at the end of the webinar. So following feedback in last year's communication survey, we reviewed the information in the ANCP manual. In this year's revision, we've included more information on how NGOs should engage to acknowledge ANCP and created a new section on digital media. There's also new information around engaging with Australian High Commissions and embassies. As with all the documents we produce for ANCP, I'm keen to receive feedback on these guidelines. I really want us to work together to increase the conversations around Australian aid, and I want to ensure we produce clear guidelines that work for everyone. It's worth noting here that we want you to communicate why we want you to communicate about Australian aid. And this is because of the potential benefits for all ANCP NGOs. In this fiscal environment, we need to collectively demonstrate the value of the aid program and work to shift attitudes around aid. We want to ensure the longevity of this program by clearly showing what can be achieved with Australian aid support, and we need your support in doing this. I'll now hand over to Deborah to talk about branding for aid projects.
Okay, thanks very much, Annabelle. Hello everyone, I'm really delighted to be here for this first webinar, and I hope it's the first of many in building a good, mutually satisfying relationship with you guys on your aid branding and comms. I'm standing in for colleagues today, so I'm afraid I can't profess to any deep and detailed knowledge of aid branding. And I also just want to point out that branding elements in the development of a corporate visual identity is relatively new to DFAT. Since integration with the former AusAid, we've been expanding and consolidating our guidance and gradually educating and building awareness among our staff at overseas posts. It's also the first time that DFAT itself has had its own visual identity, and it takes time to reach our global staff, to effect some change, and we're really keen to be flexible and responsive to your local needs. So I think one of the key things is that we'd like to use this webinar as an opportunity to invite you to suggest some scenarios where there might be some uncertainty about aid branding, and to share some examples of where you might see other governments, how they approach branding and their acknowledgement of their government's contribution, so that we can ensure our guidance to you is up to date and reliable and reflects your real needs. So the slide on the screen is showing the DFAT website where all the logo files, our contact details, and some quite simple guidance is listed. The essence of the guidance is that on all your aid programs and activities, you should use the Australian aid, the kangaroo identifier. The other crests, the DFAT crest and the Australian government crest, aren't actually in and of themselves logos. And so we prefer it if you came to our section or to Annabelle's section to just seek some clarification on how and where you can use these. Some benchmarks are that if it's to an international audience and it's not aid, you can use the Australian government crest. If it's a domestic audience and not aid, you can use the DFAT crest. I think it's probably better that if you do have any queries, you do direct them to us by sending a quick email. The government crests do come with a whole set of quite specific other restrictions. The Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet website contains all the guidance on using the Australian government crest. Some of the restrictions are that it has to be kept to 20 millimetres wide. You have to retain the integrity of the actual crest. You can't use it with political logos. The dignity of the crest shouldn't be compromised by any adjacent signs or features. The crest shouldn't be used as a decorative or artistic element. It shouldn't be overprinted with words or images, and it should always have prominence over and above other images and graphic elements. There's a lot of other guidance on the aid identifier on our website. It talks about the different colour varieties. There's a black against a white against a dark background, a red and white against a blue background. And in co-branding, we've explained there that your logo can appear alongside the Australian aid identifier, but the kangaroo should be in the most prominent place. And that could include the top left of the page, or if it doesn't work visually, the bottom left of the page. Managing contractors, NGOs and multilateral organisations and their staff mustn't use the Australian government crest or the Australian aid identifier on any stationery, including business cards, because this can incorrectly imply that the organisation acts with the authority of the Australian government or that the staff are Australian government employees. I think that's probably it for me. Very incredible.
Now just talk to the acknowledgement clauses within the ANCP manual. It states that NGOs under ANCP must acknowledge the support of the Australian government through their ANCP funded work, and this is a contractual requirement. And you need to demonstrate how you've done this each year. New to the manual this year, we did detail some information around why we ask for upfront and obvious. And first and foremost, this is for transparency. Being upfront and obvious means people in Australia and overseas are clearly and immediately informed of the extent of Australia's contribution. This transparency shows where and how Australian government funds are being used. Secondary to the transparency is also promoting the Australian identity. Acknowledgement applies to everything referring to the program, so this includes things like project signage, publications, annual reports, events, websites, stories, articles, media releases, speeches and interviews. In the communications survey I ran with you last year, 96% of NGOs said they're acknowledging the Australian government, and that's great, but obviously that's 100%. The ANCP manual includes a list of opportunities for communicating about the Australian government support, and we need you to consider all possible opportunities each time you communicate about your ANCP funded programs and projects. And we know you're doing a lot more that's on our list, and please keep doing this and making every effort to tell about it so we can cross-promote the work you're doing as well. Before I go on to some good examples of branding that we've seen in the field, I want to talk about the importance of verbal acknowledgement and informing beneficiaries. And this is where a big difference can be made in regards to understanding the aid program and the Australian government support. So we ask that when talking to your beneficiaries, you make it clear where the funding is coming from, that the Australian government thinks this is important to help this project, and that they are supporting your NGO and your implementing partner to achieve your goals. And also when talking to heads of mission or MPs, anyone that might not understand ANCP so well, that you take the opportunity to explain the program and help them understand how the program works and your achievements and how the program model supports those achievements. Verbal acknowledgement is an effective and no-cost way that you can really increase understanding and support of ANCP and the Australian aid it delivers. I've just included here a few branding examples that have come through to performance reports. Just a range that are showing that some of them are to do with the quality of the application, but also a lot of them that are possibly like low cost and creative ideas as well. You can skip through this quite quickly, but this one was one that the mural was painted by the local children, so it's a nice low cost way to also get the locals engaged as well. One was just a particularly nicely applied signage to a sand dam. The water tank here with the labels, stickers, all really clear, equal branding, all different donors and NGO involved. This one I liked, the game for children, just because obviously something that's been produced anyway, but a nice opportunity just to get the Australian aid identifier onto something that the children will be using. This was where every hive and a whole row, you can only see a few of them, but every single one had the sticker. Also, signing at sporting events. I'll now hand back again to Deborah just to talk about DFAT and its digital media strategy and other areas of DFAT digital communication.
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle. Yeah, thanks. Up on the screen there, you'll see the front cover of our inaugural digital media strategy. It was launched at the end of last year. There's the actual documents on the DFAT website. If you just search under news and media or just search the digital media strategy. The Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, gave us a really nice introduction. So it has sort of sign off from the top. The point of having a digital media strategy for the organisation is really to create a permission space for all our staff to have the freedom to use official social media channels to engage with the public, with influencers, with our counterparts, to create a sort of open means of communication. It's founded on 5 pillars. There's equip, listen, inform, engage, and influence. It's quite interesting that the very first one is to equip, and as the strategy comes with a timeline for delivering various elements of the strategy, the number one, equip, is all about enabling our staff to have the right skills and the tools to do their job. So we're still at the stage of educating through training, similar webinars like this, to bring up to date the skills of our Australian-based and locally engaged staff to be able to use these digital tools. So I commend the strategy to you just to so we might have some slight technical issues here. I do commend the strategy to you to have a look online to just see how DFAT's approaching our use of social media. It's another interesting point is that all of our efforts are anchored to the department's strategic framework and values, which is another document, a core reference document on our website, which explains what our purpose and priorities are. So all of our communications are tied to these priorities that take us through to 2019, and our messaging needs to be consistent and reinforce these, which include delivering an innovative aid program centred on the Indo-Pacific region, which contributes to sustainable economic growth, poverty reduction, and regional stability. So do take a look at that and look for ways that your efforts are sort of in sync with our digital media strategy and our strategic framework and values. If we can click through to the next one. Under the News and Media tab on the DFAT website, we also have the consolidated list of all of our DFAT official social media accounts. We have corporate accounts here in Australia, and we have every state and territory office on Twitter, and then our global presence is there in alphabetical order by country. So take a look at those. Please do follow them and engage with them. And Annabelle will go through in a bit more detail how you can actually do that. But it is growing, so I do encourage you to bookmark that site and just keep an eye on the range of different channels. Our strategy indicates that we're platform agnostic, so we have everything from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're happy to use LinkedIn, Google+, we've got YouTube, we've got, we're hoping to develop a digital asset management library, which includes a photo library and multimedia to sort of replace or augment our YouTube and Flickr. So do, as I say, check into it. It is constantly growing. The next slide takes you to a feature which is there on that front page, which is an innovation called the Stream, which consolidates all of our global social media content into a live stream, which you can sort by our head of mission or by the region. So do go in and take a look at that, and it could become a sort of useful way for you to engage with those accounts. When you click on them, it takes you to the actual platform. If we can move to the next one. The DFAT Twitter account is the oldest one. We started that in 2011. That's one of the corporate accounts that, along with our new Facebook page and a DFAT blog, which are only sort of about 6 months old. This one now has over 60,000 followers. And as you're probably communications professionals, I don't need to tell you about the Twitter list facility on Twitter. There on the screen, you can see that we had started making one for NGOs, but I do propose that we perhaps create an ANCP Twitter list with all of your handles on it. It becomes a very effective way for us to scroll through all your content, and then we can share and retweet and like your content. It will be a public list, which means that you can also subscribe to it and see what each other are saying about your various programs and activities. So that's it from me on the DFAT social media side of things. Back to Annabelle.
Thank you. This year, the manual also includes social media guidelines, and as Deborah said, we can see that DFAT's increasing their social media presence, and ANCP, as part of that, also wants to use digital communications to better tell the story of what Australian Aid Program is able to do. Within the guidelines, we begin with a statement just saying acknowledging ANCP funding on NGO websites and via social media is an essential part of recognising the program and the Australian government support. And we just detail within there the way we'd like you to see you start doing that on your ANCP project pages. Communicating about Australia's aid program and the ANCP can take many forms. A number of examples are listed here and also in the manual. Where possible, social media posts should focus on program outcomes and achievements and highlight the priorities of that specific framework. Mentioned as well. As most of you will know, our ANCP focus at the moment has primarily been on Twitter, and this is to do with the findings from the communication strategy. The majority of awareness raising that the ANCP NGOs are doing is on Twitter. I have within there that the ANCP related Twitter activity occurs through the @DFAT and @holds humanitarian accounts, and that's true, although as of yesterday we extended that and did do some tweets from @Ewan McDonald, our Deputy Secretary, for some climate change tweets around World Environment Day. So we're really keen in the program to continue and extend a number of people inside DFAT that are talking about Australian aid and the achievements of our programs. We're also really keen to start seeing our ministers talking about our projects and the program in the future as well, and it's definitely something we're working towards. There's just some suggestions that within the, or requests within the manual there about following these and any other ones that are handles that are relevant to you, tweeting about ANCP related activities and retweeting all the tweets that we tweet about your Twitter handle. You'll mostly, I think, be aware that ANCP has an annual, we started a Twitter schedule where we include ANCP events, M&E visits, and also international days. And during the year, I've reached out to the contacts and asked you to contribute to this schedule, and I've had 31 NGOs engage with the schedule so far this year, which is fantastic. There's been a mixed response, I would say, to the tweet so far. We've had, from the NGOs, we've had some really great engagement, and also on occasion lack of engagement. There's no retweet of a program promoting your work. It's definitely of mutual benefit for us to be communicating about the achievements of our partnership. We want to increase the number of online conversations about what the Australian Aid Program does and why, and we need you to engage in the conversations we've started as well as start your own as well. I'm really grateful for the content you've already provided to increase the communications around Australian Aid and ANCP on Twitter. Please do continue to provide material and create your own content to collectively demonstrate the value of the aid program and show what can be achieved through Australian Aid support. I will be reaching out, we're sort of running out to the end of the International Day schedule for this financial year, so I'll be reaching out to you again in the coming months to start planning International Days for the next financial year. I've just got a few great examples of engagement that we've had so far on Twitter. This content was provided for World NGO Day, and it definitely demonstrated a new level of engagement from our partners and was greatly appreciated by DFAT. You can see some examples of recognition of the partnership, thanking us and how we've worked together to deliver Australian aid. So our ANCP hashtags and handles are hashtag Australian Aid and hashtag ANCP, and so far at DFAT, at Oz Humanitarian, as I said, at McDonald, we're starting to use as well. NGOs should tag tweets related to ANCP with at DFAT, and this can be in the body of the tweet or on an accompanying image. All ANCP related tweets should include the hashtag ANCP. This is to confirm that ANCP is supporting that project and allows us to capture the tweets about ANCP and to engage with the tweet as well. The combination will allow us to cross-promote the tweet and further the reach. When mentioning ANCP support, NGOs should refer to it as hashtag Australian Aid. I appreciate on Twitter, we're always very limited in space with characters. So depending on the message and what you're doing, if you can just try and include some of the hashtags at the end and tag the end of the tweet or in the images, that works really well as well. As Deborah mentioned before, there are other social media channels as well. At the moment, we're not producing those content for those within ANCP, within the team, but we're definitely interested in hearing from you as far as any sort of content that you could put forward towards any of the accounts that we're running. We've got the Flickr library, we've got a YouTube channel, and particularly the blog does take a third-party contribution, so we'd be really interested to receive any ideas and contributions from any of you. The manual this year also had a section around engaging with Australian High Commissions and embassies, and we really want to assist your engagement with posts. So in this 2017 to 18, we're going to create a support pack, which will contain information to help you connect with posts. We already have a number of ideas from the communication survey, but please do contact me directly with any further requests or suggestions. The current plans at the moment are to include some guidance on the best way to communicate with posts and clarity on what different posts are looking for in terms of engagement. Also, we're looking to have a dedicated ANCP focal point at each post. We'll probably hold those as a contact and you can reach out to us for 2017, but we're hoping to create a shared site where all this information will be on in 2018. There would also be some information around clarity on holding NGO roundtables and details on other times NGOs can reach out. Also from the communication survey, we had some need for standard wording on certain elements of the ANCP, and one of these topics was definitely around match funding. Started to create some wording that I've put on the slide here just to share with you. Obviously, we all know it's quite a difficult one to talk about. Annual grants received by NGOs. NGOs can vary and it depends on a number of factors, including the total budget, the number of NGOs in the program, and the IDE averages of each NGO. So the wording around the match funding can't apply that we will match the public contribution if this is not technically correct. And we need to accurately reflect how ANCP funding is allocated. So I've started to create some standard text for use and would like your thoughts. There is this text, and a recent example with Murray Stokes has also looked at developing the idea of how the donations are combined with ANCP funding, Australian government funding for extended reach. So an example from Murray Stokes was every donation you make to this project will be combined with funding from the Australian government to reach more people. And they also used the second point around committing to match the amount of money. And that's all for now. So I can see there have been some questions that have come through. I know I saw the first one while I was looking from Aaron about sending around the branding examples, so you can share those with your partners, and that's absolutely fine. I'm more than happy to share that. We can send that out from the ANCP inbox for the contact.
Hi everyone, it's Heather Fitt from the M&E team in ANCP. And Jonathan, you've asked a question about the impact on rights holders with such prominent branding and being careful that it doesn't reinforce old stereotypes. I think we'd probably agree. And if there are any questions as to how you use the branding in country, we'd obviously suggest that you talk to our colleagues at the embassies and high commissions who have got a much more on the ground connection with when and where it's appropriate to use the Australian aid branding. But I think we are also quite keen to make sure that where possible we can use the branding and being careful that it doesn't have any negative impacts. And there's a second question on tips for recognition in traditional print, such as magazines, other than textual acknowledgement. Well, again, I think you could use photos, you could have, I guess, excerpts from the Twitter, you know, sort of a, you know, the feeds, doing it that way. I guess the print media, having the acknowledgement, such as Annabelle said, or photos are the most obvious ways to be able to do that.
Yes, we can share the slides.
Yeah, we'll forward them to.
And the slides will also be part of the webinar that goes.
Yeah. So the webinar will go onto YouTube as sort of recorded, I guess, with the audio, and then the slides, yeah, we can forward out if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, both the website and some guidance I've got here that we could share with you provides a sort of a form of words for acknowledgement in text, which we may not have covered off adequately. I could just read you on publications here. The advice I have here is that you should use the following acknowledgement for projects where Australia is the only donor. The project or initiative name is supported by the Australian government and implemented by insert your NGO name, or Australian aid initiative implemented by insert NGO on behalf of the Australian government. And then for projects where Australia is the major funder, you could say project or initiative name is supported by the Australian government, comma, other donor name and other donor name. So I think one of the things we certainly should do is just go back and refresh and revisit the DFAT branding page to make sure that it does reflect your real needs, as I said at the outset, but also provide some case studies. So it's one of our work in progress is to liven it up with some real examples for you. That's where your feedback is really quite effective.
So I received quite a few questions at once. We've said yes to sharing the slides. Yeah, so the best hashtags to use on Twitter and Facebook are hashtag Australian Aid and hashtag ANCP.
I think in terms of the, if the ANCP contribution is quite small, again, it's a case of where it's proportional. Yeah. If we're 10% and you've got, you know, 9 other donors, then I think it's balancing up. You know, we wouldn't be the most prominent logo, but if you are acknowledging other donors, I think we would expect an acknowledgement of the Australian aid contribution. Where ANCP funding may be 90% of a project, then we would expect it to be more prominent along with your own logo. So I think it's a case of, you know, be sensible about it, check in with colleagues if you're not sure, or with the ANCP team or the communications team in DFAT. But from monitoring and engagement visits that we've done, it's often we've noticed, and those of you who we have visited you will have seen in the reports that we've sent back is we often haven't been able to see any recognition of Australian aid, and that's where we're wanting to try and improve it. There's the Australian aid identifier for promotional materials in program countries and not for public communications in Australia. Well, again, I think it's when you're talking about specific projects where you're reporting back on a project that's been funded through the Australian aid program, we'd want some recognition there. This ties in with another question, which was about the where most of your material is fundraising material. I think we wouldn't want to be included there, but where you're talking about specific project outcomes
and achievements. In response to the AusAid instead of Australian aid, no. Unfortunately, with that one, we really need to start using that language in Australian aid. AusAid is too connected to the old brand, and we always want to be referring to what we provide as Australian aid. I know it's a difficult one in spacing, but it's definitely the way we want to be communicating about the program work. Okay, I hope we've answered everyone's questions, but if anyone who's asked a question doesn't feel like we've appropriately answered it, please just type again and we'll have another go. Otherwise, also, yeah, you can definitely email the ANCP inbox and we'll answer that question to you directly.
We can see there are a few people who have got some questions that look like they're coming through, so we'll just wait before we answer them. Thank you, Anne.
Great, thanks, Anne.
Well, the actual logo files themselves come in a range of different file formats, and there is, and I'm not a design expert by any means, but depending on the file extension and how slick your IT or graphic design capabilities are, you can actually use the logo at the end as an acknowledgement of your video product. So by all means, I mean, you can contact communications@dfat.gov.au with some examples and some further advice on that. But maybe that's another good case study that we could put on our website just to really clarify which file format is suitable for multimedia products. So yeah, good question. Thanks for that.
I think also with the acknowledgement, if there is either text in the video or a voiceover, it'd be a case of using those methods to also acknowledge not just the identifier. We'll get the details from ACFID on the YouTube channel that
yeah, so the YouTube link will be sent out to members. It'll be made available on the website. Yeah.
And going back to David's question about the approaches between what's the expected in program countries and communicating with the Australian audience domestically, I think it's the making sure that there is an acknowledgement of the work that you're doing. And we think you've got fantastic examples and you're doing great work. I guess it's making sure that there is acknowledgement of where the Australian government's supporting some of those projects and implementing them, I guess the dividing line is when you're then saying, and please donate to us. It's just being clear that it's not the Australian government that's, you know, asking you to donate, but that your supporters are contributing, and through the Australian government funds and your supporter funds, we're achieving a particular development outcome. Okay, advice on balancing the need to acknowledge the Australian aid at the same time advocating for halting budget cuts. Yeah, I guess this is as much recognising that we're talking about, you know, what's happening in the field with projects and what's happening with when you talk with beneficiary communities. We recognise that you have independence in your own right, and you're legitimate development actors who can advocate for an increase in the aid budget. But I guess it's balancing where, you know, you can't have the Australian government, you know, advocating for greater budget, an increase in the aid budget while at the same time cutting it, given that DFAT is part of, you know, we're part of the government. So I guess it's as much using your judgment there, and not, if you're advocating for a reduction in the budget cuts, putting the aid at.
In providing clear messages, context is everything. So you sort of need to think about the context of each use. So.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any further questions or any press for clarity again on any of those questions?
All right. Well, have you got a, is the follow-up contact clear for everybody? The ANCP?
Yeah, ancp@dfat.gov.au is the generic ANCP inbox if there's any further comments or questions in regards to this webinar.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate a virtual round of applause for had friends at DFAT today, and keep an eye out for the email for the survey asking your feedback on the webinar and the webinar series, as well as the link for the YouTube, which should be available up on the website next week. So thank you very much, everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.